So in Ois Zayin, Ois Gimel, page Zayin. Al Pisa Yuvim Gamash Kosa Bezoyer Bepirish. ובגפן שלשה שריגים. According to this will be understood what it says in the Zohar, and explaining that in the vine that the Sarah Mashkim saw in his dream, there were these three tendrils, three branches or three vine tendrils. Ilain inun plasa dargin iloin. These are the three levels of above. The nafke mahai gefen that comes out of this vine. Kohani levoi v'Yisraeli. Kohanim levim Yisraelim are signified by these three levels of the vine. The Mokmachim have in different places explained. Inyan Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. It corresponds to the three of us. Also, it's also corresponding to the three Yomim Tovim. Shebachlolos, the common denominator between whether it's Kohanim, Levim, Yisraelim, whether it's Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, was the three Yom Tovim of Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuos. That it's in general the three lines of Chesed, Kava Yamin, Gvura, Kava Smoil, and Tiferes, Kava Emtzoy. Isa Biuri Azoyer. Agois L'Mayim Rabbeinu Azokin Hanisker La'el is brought down the explanations of the Zoyer of the Tzemach Tzedek. In his notes of the Maimer Alter Rebbe that was mentioned before, we mentioned in the beginning of this Maimer that the Tzemach Tzedek has notes on this Maimer of the Alter Rebbe of the year Tavkuf Samach Beis in Oira Torah, but in additional to his notes on the Maimer that he has in his Sefer of Oira Torah, there's also the Sefer Biuri Azoyer Tzemach Tzedek that also has notes to this Maimer. And he asks as follows: the Tzorech Iyun. We need to examine this. Sharei, top of the next page, top page Ches, Koyin Osr B'Yayin. A Koyin is prohibited in wine. So how do we talk about of all this wine that's coming down and the Hamshachas, etc., what does it have to do with a Koyin? A Koyin is beyond all of this levels of the wine that comes out of Chachma, etc. So now the Rebbe in the brackets is going to add explanation to this question. We could add in explaining this question. Seemingly, this was a matter that was only in a dream. Why is that? It's in other words, if it was only a dream, why are you getting so out of shape? So a kohen and halacha down here, he's going to the Beis Hamikdash, he can't drink wine. What does that have to do with a dream that the butler saw? And he saw three tendrils of a vine, and one of them is a kohen. What's so terrible? So he says, because what he saw in a dream, everything that occurs down here has a shorish above. All matters the way they're down here below is associated with the idea of the way they're spiritually, like we're going to have soon in the next few Prakim in Tanya, that the reason why there's 10 soul powers by a person is because Nishtal Mehen. It came down by chain descent from the 10 spheres above. And therefore, the same thing when we talk about Levium and Koyanim, what they may or may not drink or do. This has to do with levels above. And therefore, things have to fit into their different particular levels above. It's known the idea of wine is associated with the Levim. We know that the avoid of the Levim in the Beis Hamikdash is they used to sing shira, they used to play musical instruments and sing songs. And we also know the Chazal say, the song that, for example, the Levim sang in the Beis Hamikdash was only with wine, when there was wine, when there was Nisach HaYayin by the Korbanos. That's when you had the Levim say Shira al HaYayin. Masha'enkin Koyanim, as opposed to Koyanim Shavidasam, B'chashoi u'berus d'oliba. Koyanim, their avoida did not involve singing. They were silent. This is Api Kabbalah, it says, because their service was such a deep service, it was the will of the heart that didn't express itself in song. Song shows an external expression of the person's Avat Hashem. Re'usa Deliba is the silence of the Koyanim. And that the Rusa Deliba also has to do with Shu'inyan Hashem and V'lo Yain. The difference between oil and wine is that oil burns very quietly. Not like, for example, a thick log. A thick log is about very noisy and makes a lot of crackling sounds and so on. Whereas the whole idea of oil is it's a very quiet type of thing. So whereas Levium is about loud, and that's symbolized by Yayin, having to do with song, both Yayin brings out that song, that external manifestation. The Koyanim were reserved, they were quiet, they were internalized, and therefore the avodah was the Kohen Gadol, Aaron Kohen lit the menorah, which had to do with the oil, because oil shows on quietude. And therefore the Rebbe concludes the question of the Tzemach Tzedek, V'imkein mawa pirush ובגפן nafke loirak levi v'Yisrael el gam koyani. Therefore, what's it mean that from this vine came out not just Levim and Yisraelim, but also Koyanim, since the idea of Koyanim are beyond the idea of wine. So in other words, the Rebbe is explaining, everything goes beruchnis. We don't care about the fact that this was a dream down here by the butler. The point is, everything has a spiritual significance. If we say that beruchnis, Koyanim, their avoides, v'chashoy, berusa deliba, they're quiet, their idea of oil, therefore, how can you say that they are descended from and coming out of the vine? So the explanation is, we could say that it's yayin hamishumar ba'anov mesheshis mebereshis shesh ksaves da'ava. We are saying, we said before that there's a level of the wine that's still protected and stored and preserved in its grapes from the 6 days of creation. So we're talking about the wine, the way it's still hidden and concealed. And this idea that they are concealed and preserved within the grapes, as we mentioned, that concept that's going to be part of the Suda of Mashiach's times. This idea of being concealed in the grapes from the 6 days of creation is about the 6 middays of Chachma. The way in Chachma, there Abba is a level of Chachma. In Chachma, there is the Shisha middays inside, and therefore, since we're dealing with the level of Chachma, even that wine is applicable, because we're talking about the concealed level of wine. Why is that so? So therefore also Koyanim are applicable to this level. And the Rebbe says, because of the Chachma component, because it's the level of Chachma, it has a shaykhs with Koyanim. Concerning what it says, by the nega, when a person has a nega tzaras, and he's brought to the Kohen, and he will become, the Kohen will pronounce him pure. What is this power that has to be dafke through the Kohen? Because the Kohen is the one that's connected with the light of Chachma, and because Mitzoram is the level that literally the skin is a white color. White color indicates that Chayis doesn't reach over there. In Kabbalah, it's Istalkus HaMoichen. The level of intellect leaves. Comes the Kohen, who is the level of the Oid of Chachma, and he infuses the level again with the appropriate light, with the appropriate vitality, and through that, he purifies the Mitzvah. So we see that Koyanim have to do with the level of Chachma. So even though wine is not the level of the Koyanim, but when we're talking about wine, the way it's concealed and preserved within the grapes, that is the level of Chachma, and that has to do with Koyanim. Ad kan toichen a maimer, up till here is the content of the maimer of the Alter Rebbe of Tavkuf Samach Beis about the Begefen's Shloisha Shrigim. So now the Rebbe is going to connect this with Yutas Kislev. Ois Daled, line 17. We can also explain the connection with Yudas Kislev. Shechol Tamid B'Smichs L'Parshas Vayeshev. Yudas Kislev always comes out in close proximity on the calendar date of Parshas Vayeshev. And this year, meaning in Tafshin Lamed Hey, just like our calendar year now, Tafshin Pei Vav. It comes out in the middle of the week of Parshas Vayeshev. We just now explained that there's the Shloisha Sherigim. These are the three levels of the three kavim, essentially. That's why it's the Kainim Levim Yisraelim, the Avos, the three Yom Tovim, etc. So he says, Yutas Kislev was the idea that my soul was redeemed in peace. Like the Alter Rebbe wrote in his well-known letter, that the Alter Rebbe wrote this letter when he went out to freedom. When I read in Sefer Tillim in the pasuk that I've redeemed in peace my soul, prior to my beginning, the pasuk following the pasuk of Padav Shalom, Yatsasi l'shalom, I went out in peace. Vasayim b'shalom, and I will conclude with peace. Ma'ashem shalom, from Hashem was peace. Now, this idea of the three trendles, the three kavim and avodah, pasuk zel lamdu b'gemara. From this pasuk we derive in the Gemara, shekala oisik b'toyda u'mosasadim, whoever is involved in learning Torah and doing acts of kindness, u'mispal l'matzibur, and he dams with a minyan. My law, I consider it upon him as if the Hebrew says, if he redeemed me and my children from amongst the nations of the world. Rabim is talking about the many people that he davened with. That shows on Tefillah B'tzibur. Shalom is about Gemilas Chasadim, makes shalom between people, like we learned in previous Amarim. Also, Torah was nitna lasa shalom ba'olam, was meant to bring peace in the world, and this causes a redemption of Hashem and peace. So he says, line 3, v'hainu shepad v'shalom goyim, who Indian shloisha kavim, the idea of that he redeemed in peace, is the idea of the three lines, which has to do, we were talking about the threes the whole time. Torah, which is kavim, Torah is in the middle line of the Sfiras HaTiferes. Gemilas Chasadim is Kavi doing acts of kindness that has to do with the right line, that is primarily about Chesed, and with Tefillah Shukeneged Tmidim Tiknun, and davening that was established corresponding to the Karban Tamid Shu'inyan Avodah. That's the idea of the Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash. The Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash is you consume the Karbanis in the fire to go upwards. That's Kav HaSmoil, the left side, the idea of Gevurah rising upwards. Allah Mu'matal Ma'ilo. So what's the significance between Shalom and these three? Through the intermingling of these three lines. By having all these three things. Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasadim, Poilim, Inyan HaPediyah B'Shalom. We affect and influence the idea there should be the redemption in peace. And like the Rabbeinu always bring down the emphasis there, specifically a peaceful way of redemption. And that's the true preparation, or that's the preparation for the true idea of peace that will be in the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, in the way we understand that it comes quickly, that it should be in the revealed and open way.